Joining us, MS Now contributor Inzamam Rashid in Dubai, co-founder and director of economic policy at Veda Partners, Henrietta Trace, as promised, and former senior advisor for Arab-Israeli negotiations at the U.S. State Department. Aaron David Miller, he's also a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Let's talk about the blockade first itself. How is it working so far, Inzamam?
Well, it seems that there are a number of U.S. Navy vessels around the entrance to the Strait of Hormuz. But the big question is how does this militarily actually work? And that's the big question. I don't think many people truly understand what President Trump's plan is here. Can they actually seize vessels? Do they just kind of go up towards some of the ports on the coastline of Iran and sit there and threaten any ships from leaving or coming in? There are big question marks about the actual logistical military operation, and hopefully some of your guests can clear a bit of that up. But right now, we are currently in a state of, as you put it, Katie, who blinks first? It's essentially a standoff. And yes, we already had an Iranian blockade on the overall Strait of Hormuz, a selective one where they were allowing only selective vessels to pass through. Then now we've got this US blockade on ports on the coastline of Iran. And then also tonight, Iran has responded saying that they will implement their own blockade on ports right across the Gulf states, just like this one behind me. This is Jebel Ali port, one of the largest ports in the Middle East, a huge logistical hub, incredibly important for the UAE in particular. And so if Iran goes through with their retaliation of essentially blocking off ports around the Gulf, when of course that's just going to have even further impact to the global economy. But we are now in this situation where essentially if President Trump's Navy vessels go towards the Iranian coastline, well, this could get very, very messy because, Katie, we could essentially see combat on that very narrow stretch of water where usually 20% of the world's oil passes through. But for the past 6 weeks, that's been pretty redundant. In fact, it's only really been Iranian oil that's been going out of Iran, and they've doubled their export numbers, mainly going to the likes of China. And China is, of course, another important point. Tonight, they've actually come out and specifically said to the US president that our ships are moving in and out of the waters of the Strait of Hormuz. We have trade and energy agreements with Iran. We will respect and honor those agreements and expect others not to interfere with our affairs. Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz and it is open for us. That's directly from the Chinese Minister of Defense. Iran, in retaliation, called these specific measures that President Trump has introduced today a few hours ago. They said that they were ridiculous and laughable, and they said that Iran very much still controls the Strait of Hormuz. I think the big question is that if we do get into some specific fighting as a result, if there will be attacks from Iran towards US Navy vessels and then retaliation from the US to the ports of Iran, but also some of their Navy assets there, then the ceasefire that we're in, this fragile ceasefire, which is still going on for another 9 days or so, will effectively break down. And there's no doubt that fighting will resume. All the while, we see still huge, major impacts on the global economy. And now with this move from both the US and potentially Iran tonight as well, there's just no real signs of it letting up, Katie.
So I think Inzi laid it out really well. Aaron, what are you watching for?
You know, until this morning, I thought we were going nowhere. But as reports begin to leak out of what the Vice President Vance, I'm presuming on behalf of the President of the United States, offered in Islamabad, and what the Iranian response was, we may actually be, maybe, and I say this with great hesitation and reservation, into a serious negotiation. The vice president apparently proposed a 20-year moratorium on the Iranian enrichment, thereby conceding that the Trump administration is prepared to accept a pause. And the Iranians came back with a number under 10. If that is in fact the case, then we actually may have a serious negotiation. As far as the straits are concerned, look, the U.S. Navy they'll identify through shipping companies and through their own intelligence which tankers are offloading at Kharg Island Iranian oil exports. And they will seize them or stop them as they try to make their transit through the Straits of Hormuz to Asia, largely. I think that over time, if this blockade holds, it could do serious damage to the Iranian economy, but it will not, in my judgment, bring the Iranians to capitulate or actually even get them to soften their positions at the negotiating table. It's going to jack up the price of oil. And if this goes on to May and June, on the cusp of the driving season, you could easily end up with oil over $150 a barrel, which obviously will be a complete nightmare for American consumers. But again, Katie, I would not rule out the possibility, even now, as we approach the end of the ceasefire on April 21st, there may actually be a negotiation here. I'm hoping.
It's rare to hear you as hopeful as you sound, so I'm gonna take that to heart. I want to talk about the practicalities for the moment, Henrietta. You just heard Aaron talk about maybe oil getting over $150 a barrel if this is still going on over the summer. I mean, it's already pretty priced in for how long? The oil prices as we see them now and the gas prices. For how much longer will these gas prices be as high as they currently are?
Well, right now we're off the highs. We're at $102. But just for anybody watching at home, I mean, you wiped out your entire benefit of the One Big Beautiful Bill and the overtime on tips that President Trump was talking about in the Oval Office just a minute ago, about $19 ago. So not only are we escalating, the ships are not flowing through the strait at anywhere near the rates that they were before the bombing started. The president has suggested that as many as 35 ships have gotten through. That's cool, but we used to have 130 ships per day. And the reports are coming in that Chinese ships are being turned around and are not being permitted access through the strait. So what happens, and really the way that I'd look at it, is that gas is your first indicator. What comes next is shipping. And by that, I mean transit across America on trucks that you see for Amazon or Target or Walmart. Those are all now more expensive. Diesel prices are well above $5 at this point nationwide. What happens after that is your food gets more expensive. Everything that you're buying on the shelves at Walmart that got delivered from those trucks coming through paying diesel prices that came off of the strait and came out of oil and gas prices that are 21% higher and leading directly to inflation. So Oxford Economics is anticipating that inflation will hit 4%. And that means no Fed rate cuts. That means Fed rate hikes. Your mortgage is more expensive. It's harder to create a new business. You're talking about a seize up structurally. Gas is just the first thing that we see.
Let's talk about food prices. What's going to happen with my groceries? How much higher are they going to go?
Well, if gas is up 20%, you should see the ripple effects that are pretty substantial. 40 to 50% of the cost of your food comes from the cost of fertilizer and everything that's locked up in the strait. So nitrogen, urea, all of the fertilizer components are about half of the cost of your food. So if that is increasing from, what was it, $70 a barrel before the bombing started, and now we're at 102, that's going to compound. And I suspect that as we get into seize up territory with these tankers, which is where we continue to be, you're going to see that continue to escalate. And for diesel, it's worse. And that's, of course, what the farmers not only use for fertilizer, but to run their tractors, to run all their farm equipment. I mean, the prices trickle out. We should start to see that hit around April 29th.
Inzi, what about the Middle East broadly, the neighbors of Iran? We've been talking a lot about how some neighbors want to see potentially the U.S. go further, make sure that they really dismantle this regime, because leaving it in place and still in a powerful position or a position of leverage puts them all at greater risk now. Is that still the case? Are they putting pressure on Donald Trump to stay or to go?
Well, when you look at the broader GCC, the Gulf countries, Katie, the problem that you have now is that because of this conflict and because of the way the US has been operating, even the way Israel has been operating and how Iran has been responding, you've now effectively got a GCC which is all pretty broken. They've all got their own ideas of what they want out of this conflict, what they want in terms of a conclusion to this war. Here in the UAE, for example, the Strait of Hormuz is very much top of the agenda right now. And so they've actively said is that we will help the US in any efforts to try and open up the Strait of Hormuz. It's still unclear, even though some of my conversations with senior UAE ministers today, whether in fact they would send Navy ships to the Strait of Hormuz to assist President Trump's Navy to essentially blockade some parts of the Strait of Hormuz, to blockade Iranian oil leaving. But they are essentially on standby, and it's something that they could do. Then, of course, you've got Saudi Arabia, on the other hand, who've been very close contact with Pakistan, particularly over the weekend when these negotiations were happening. And then you go to the other extreme, you've got Oman. Oman, once again, calling for peace. They have that positivity and that optimism that, in fact, Vice President J.D. Vance, the delegation that went to Islamabad, and Iran can come to some form of agreement. And they want to see that happen before this war gets even more messy than it already is. So you've still very much got a fragmented GCC. One good sign is that Iran isn't sending as many missiles or drones into the GCC as it has been doing over the last 6 weeks. Yes, there were a few in Bahrain today, but it has been a lot quieter. So that kind of issue has been put to bed for now in this fragile ceasefire. But it is very much the Strait of Hormuz for the likes of the UAE, Qatar as well, that is on the top of the agenda. And so I think they will be quite welcoming to this US effort to try and block Iranian oil, particularly leaving the Strait of Hormuz or entering the Strait of Hormuz. And so I think it's something that the Gulf nations will be keeping a very, very close eye on in the next few hours and days, Katie.